my name's Rebecca Richardson, but most people call me Becky, and I thought today we could go over 3 bits of writing advice I wish I followed. So this video is less advice that I'm giving to other people and more advice that I myself need to actually follow. It's the kind of advice that comes up in every pep talk I give myself when I'm absolutely stressed out writing, and yeah, it's still things that I haven't actually managed to do. There's a certain level of self-care that comes with being a writer that every writer needs to eventually learn how to do. And I think that's just a way to tackle the pressure, I suppose, that comes with writing and the stress that it sometimes brings, especially in cases like, I believe, Camp Nano's happening at the moment, and then we have the November NaNoWriMo happening soon. Especially when you're writing big amounts like that, you do kind of have to make sure that you focus on yourself. And these 3 bits of advice I have are just things that I wish I could really get into my head to help me de-stress. Number 1 is don't aim for the perfect first draft. I am terrible sometimes for writing a draft that's never been done before, just something completely new, and looking back over it, like, just even if there's only a few paragraphs on paper, I'll look back over it and think that's bad. That is so bad. Why is that there? You need to delete it, you need to start again. And thankfully I never do actually delete it. Instead I just take a few days out to sit and think about how terrible it is and how I'm never going to get anywhere with my career. Discussions about first drafts are definitely something that I hear about a lot, even at author signings I've been to. It's been discussed how some people write quicker than others because some feel the need to edit as they write their first draft, and some just bang out a first draft and deal with it later. I myself am trying to become a deal with it later person. In general, I tend to be someone who just writes the first draft and then goes back and edits later. However, it isn't something that I do with ease. At the beginning of my first draft, I'm always quite chill about it. I'm always like, it's fine, it doesn't matter if it's bad because you'll just sort that out later. That's a problem for future you. Everything is okay. But usually when I get like 2/3 into it, that starts to fall apart, and that's when I start thinking that it's just terrible and it's always going to be terrible. It always happens around the same time with my first draft. It's just happened with the current project I'm working on. That's just when I look back on it and suddenly I'm like, wow. This is terrible. It's never going to be good. It's never going to read like it should, like a professional writer would, and it just all falls apart. It's also usually at this point that I feel the need to start going back over my first draft and changing things and editing it, and I end up wasting so much time just going over and over everything, trying to sort it out. And I really need to learn to stop doing that. At the end of the day, the first draft is exactly that. It's the first draft. It's not what you're trying to like query with or you're going to like post online for people. Nobody's going to see that first draft other than you unless you want them to see it. And so it doesn't matter if it's really bad. I think it's important to remember that like literally everybody hates their first draft, and that's something that I was almost like shocked to learn at first, that nobody writes a first draft and it's like, oh, it's perfect, and then they like make it a bestseller or something. Like, that's never the first draft. And so expecting to write a perfect first draft is ridiculous because it's not going to happen. And I know that, but does that stop me from worrying about it? No. I am definitely getting better at it. I've learned that when I kind of hit that wall or that point where suddenly everything seems terrible and I'm not going to be able to get any further without fixing what's already come before it, I just step back and I do something else. Like this week I haven't been doing much writing because I hit that point and I stressed myself out about it, and I just stepped back and took some time off, and now I feel much better when I'm considering going back into it probably like tomorrow. And that has definitely helped a lot. It doesn't stop me from still looking at what I've written and being like, oh, that's so terrible, but it helps just a little bit. The second piece of writing advice that I wish I could follow is write what you want, not what other people want you to write. This is an issue that has come around for me since I started self-publishing. Before then, nobody ever saw what I wrote, so it was entirely up to me. I could just write whatever I wanted and never have to worry about it. But now I find, no matter what I write, even if I have no plan to show it to anybody, I'm still thinking about what other people would think of it if it had an audience. This leads to a whole variety of different forms of stress and pressure, because instead of just writing something fun and light-hearted and not caring if it sounds bad or if it's not written overly well, I'm always thinking, this has to be good enough for an audience, this has to be good enough that people will read it and enjoy it, even if I don't plan on showing it to anyone, even if it's just some random coffee shop AU about my main characters when I'm just like developing them further. Nobody's going to see that, but I still feel the need to write it as if somebody is going to see it in the future. This has led to me kind of finding that the fun of writing has been sucked out a bit. I don't just get to sit around and like write for my own enjoyment anymore. I'm always writing thinking somebody else is going to see what I'm writing and that it has to be good for them instead of good for me. Of course, there is an element with the trilogy that I'm currently writing, which is self-published and people do read it, that I have to take the reader into account, obviously, and what they want to see. I tend to ask people after they've read one of my books, you know, what characters they like, what characters they didn't like, what plots they enjoyed, what themes they thought worked well, what they thought didn't work well, so I can take this feedback and include it in the next book. So it's written for me, obviously, but also it's written for the audience to enjoy. Sometimes I let that go a little bit too far and I start adding in things that I don't even want to write, but I think that other people will want to see. Or I'll already have the next book planned out and I'll know who's going to die. And then the book before, somebody will be like, oh, they were my favourite character. And then I'll feel like I have to change it and stop them dying, even if it's like a big plot point. And it's just a mess sometimes. At the end of the day, what I choose to write should be for me, even if I also have an audience. Obviously, I think taking the audience into account is good, but I think it should also be kept to the author and true to what they want to write, because at the end of the day, if the author doesn't want to write it, then it's not going to sound very good, is it? Because it's not what they're interested in. And I just let this overrun everything I write. Even if, like I said, it's some random fanfiction about my own characters when I'm just planning them a little better, it becomes something that I'm like, oh, I could end up putting this in like a short story or something one day and then people will see it, so it has to be great, which isn't going to happen. That's never going to happen. Nobody's ever going to see these things. But I act as if people will see these things. Even with my next series that I'm going into, when I start my 4th book, that will be completely separate to anything I've written before. And I would one day like to query it. Instead of at this very, very early stage where I've just begun planning, instead of making sure it's something that I want it to be, I'm procrastinating planning it, because every time I think about it, I'm like, it has to be something other people will read. I need to include all of these things that are in like popular books at the moment, and it needs to read like all of the best authors ever, and it needs to be perfect. Everybody should read it and never want to put it down. Even though it's so early on, instead of thinking, this is what I want to write about, this is what I would like to see in my book, I'm thinking, this is what other people will want to see in my book, even if I don't particularly want to write about that. It's something that I'm slowly learning to stop doing with time, but it is definitely still an issue at the moment. I am getting better with it. I am getting better at taking a step back from what other people will expect and thinking, but this is what I want to see, and so I'll write what I want to see and then just see what other people think of it, and if it needs editing later, then I can do that at a later date. But there is definitely quite a far way to go until I learn that I should be writing what I want to write, not what other people want to see me write. The third and final piece of writing advice that I wish I could follow is take your time. I suppose this kind of wraps up the previous 2 points as well as being a point on its own, because taking my time is definitely something that comes into play when it comes to writing my first draft and also writing what I want to and not what other people want to see me write. It's definitely something that puts the most pressure on me. Basically, I have a habit of rushing what I write, thinking that I have to get it out soon because people will want to see it soon, or that the quicker I do it, the quicker I can start editing it. All of these things that come into it that really shouldn't. It takes some people years to write books. It took me 3 years to write my first book, but then suddenly I have to have it done in 6 months. The first draft has to be done by tomorrow, which it doesn't. You know, I'm not on strict deadlines at the moment. I'm on my own deadlines. And I let some of the quality slip so I can get it written faster, which I shouldn't be doing. It also means that I put pressure on myself because I don't give myself time to breathe. Like I said, I'm taking time off this week from writing because until this moment, since I finished college, I've been like, you have to write at least 1,000 words a day. You have to get it all done now. Everything has to be written before you go on holiday. You have to finish the first draft, which basically meant that I was trying to get myself to write about 90,000 words in the space of like 5 weeks, which isn't gonna happen. And the stress from this just became ridiculous, understandably, because I can't write that many words in this amount of time. Lately, I think I've just realised the importance of taking a step back from my writing and realising that it doesn't all have to be done by tomorrow, and that I don't have to write it all super quick, because I'm not on any strict deadlines. I can just write it in my own pace, and at the end of the day, rushing it is only going to make it worse. You know, I think I've massively realised this when I've tried to write the first draft of my third book dead quick, and it's ended up being about 50,000 words shorter than both of the other books' first drafts because I rushed it instead of taking my time with it. I do plan with my fourth book to try and take more time with it because, again, that doesn't have to be written for anybody at any time. Nobody's waiting for that book to come out, and you know, possibly the fact that I have readers for my trilogy is something that affects how long I expect it to take. You know, every time I post, I get people like, when's the third book coming out? And maybe that is something that makes me want to write it faster. Maybe it's also because I want this done so I can start book 4. But I know that with book 4, because nobody's waiting for it, I can take however long I want with it, and I need to take that time with it to make sure that it's good enough. So in however many years it takes to write it, I can approach people with it and know that it's a decent book. I have definitely pushed myself to the limit with the time thing recently. Like I said, I just very nearly blew my top a few days ago, and I just stepped back from writing. I was like going insane over it, and it sapped the excitement out of it. I wasn't excited to finish the first draft of my third book, you know, the end of a trilogy that I've been working on for 5 years that I should have been super excited about and also super sad about, and I just didn't feel anything towards it. I was just annoyed that I was writing it, you know. I was killing off characters that I've been writing since I was 12, and I was just like, oh yeah, just gotta get it over with, you know, I want to move on, I want to get it over with, instead of taking time to actually think about what I was doing and like what it all meant for me and as part of the story. And hopefully now I've took a step back, I can go back to it and enjoy it that bit more that I didn't before, because that's what rushing it did. It stopped me from enjoying it, and it made it seem just like a job rather than a creative process that I'm supposed to enjoy and that I see as a hobby and a passion. However, I will be hopefully vlogging parts of my fourth book, so now that's out, if it seems like I'm rushing it, people can just be like, hey Becky, slow down a minute there, you need to stop rushing it. And that's something that I can also tell myself going forward and hopefully actually follow, as I haven't managed to do it to date. Those are 3 bits of writing advice that I really wish I could get myself to follow. I imagine a lot of people relate to this because I think it's things that as writers we all face sometimes, and it's something that we all struggle with when you know you should be doing something a certain way or you shouldn't be doing something a certain way, and you just can't seem to make your own self do it. I know with time I will get used to actually taking my time and writing what I want to write and not making myself edit my first draft over and over again because it's just so terrible, and instead I can just take a step back and relax with it a little bit more, because that's what this is about. It's about me learning to relax when it comes to writing. If you have any similar bits of advice that you try and tell yourself all the time and you just can't get across, please leave them in the comments, because I imagine lots of people will also be able to relate to them and we could discuss it. But other than that, that is the end of this. The conversation can be continued in the comments though. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it to the end, and I will see you all very soon. Bye!